All right, we are now going to move in to our next panel, New Age Recruiting. And we're going to take a look at the ways in which wineries are adapting their recruiting practices, from conducting interviews through Zoom to finding a fresh candidate pool and to selling the company's culture online. Our first panelist is Mark Johnson, Director and Head of Talent Acquisition Americas for Treasury Wine Estates. He is not only in charge of the region's recruitment plan, he is the architect of TWE's candidate and hiring manager experience, attraction strategy, and value proposition in this region. Jennie Johnson is the Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition for E&J Gallo Winery, with HR experience at several tech companies in the Silicon Valley before relocating back to Modesto. She began her career at Gallo as a project manager in 2000 and has held various roles within human resources since then. And last but not least, our moderator for today is Constance Savage, the General Manager of Lacole Number 41 in the Walla Walla Valley of Eastern Washington. She has been there since 2018 and is responsible for managing the business side of the winery, including sales, marketing, administration, and human resources. Take it away, Constance.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes. Hi, Constance.
Yes. Perfect. Well, this was a real treat. Anna and Judith, both such great presentations, and I'm already learning a lot today. And we're very fortunate to have two excellent professionals in talent acquisition today for this panel discussion and a lot of interesting questions. I will also try to keep an eye on the Q&A and chat and see if we can integrate some of the questions that you guys may have into our discussion as we go along. I wanted to kick off right away with something that is really a pertinent issue this year, and I think we owe it to our audience here to delve into that. And I'll start with you, Mark, if I could, speaking about diversity. And diversity recruiting has become a strong focus all across many industries in the United States. How have you seen this play out today in the wine business? And what are some of the things that your company is doing to address this?
Sure. First of all, can you hear me okay?
It's gapping out a little bit. We're getting a little bit of, I think, acoustic interruption. Speak a little bit more. Let's hear you start. Yeah, I think coming a bit closer. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, that's a great question. It's a hot topic today, as everybody knows.
It is a little too quiet, Mark. I think we're a little bit too quiet.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's better.
So that's a great question. It's a hot topic today. My answer is probably going to be a little bit long-winded, but I promise to get through it quickly. And I'll give you my top three, but first I want to back up a little bit and talk about how we're addressing diversity as an organization today, because it's truly everyone's responsibility and not just recruiting. At Treasury, we took a look at diversity and our journey, and we're trying to take the lead on actually changing the wine industry as a whole. And historically, particularly at the top of wine organizations, the wine industry is not very diverse. So getting to those diverse candidates can be tough. Also, when you're recruiting for diversity, you really should make sure that you have an unbiased process. And so there's several things that we're doing in this space that I'll cover today. First and foremost is making sure that we're approaching diversity the right way. We actually flipped diversity and inclusion, put inclusion first intentionally.
Mark, I want to slow you down. I'm sorry for jumping in, but we've had 3 different participants say they're having difficulty hearing you.
Okay, right. Let me try putting on my headset.
Yeah, I think we have a good 40 minutes, so it's probably worth making an adjustment now rather than.
Sure, hold on for just a minute here.
Oh, that's amazingly better. Thank you.
Is that much better?
So much better. Yeah.
Okay, great. So first and foremost, we flipped diversity and inclusion and put inclusion first intentionally. So, we're making sure that, if we're recruiting diverse candidates, that our company can support them on the enterprise. It's a long way of saying that we're partnering with our I&D council, our leadership, our business line, and our talent partners to make sure that those candidates that come in stick within the organization and they feel supported when they get here. Secondly, and this goes for small organization and large organizations, what I've found is that you really need to optimize your job marketing spend, kind of, and going with external partnerships and posting partners that can show you that they have a diverse pool of candidates that fits your organization's needs. Creating a posting strategy that really delivers what you're looking for. An example is, we noticed that we had a gap in broad diversity, so we went out and researched some partners in the industry, and we chose a partner in this space called Direct Employers to help us better market our jobs to a diverse market. And that partnership is a low-cost automated solution that uses automation to help take the bias out of the process. And so diversity is natural in the process and not forced. Then we created individual posting strategies for our business lines that's less cookie cutter, and it gets to those profiles we need in finance, supply, commercial, and ops. And in the same vein, we've automated our recruitment process to introduce some AI through another tool that we're using called Harvard that helps us assess candidates up front, so we can get to those profiles quick and easier, and also taking the bias out of the process. And the last thing that we've done is we really shifted our recruiters from just being the post and pray recruiters to being more marketing focused. We're spending time with our recruiters and helping them get out into the market and seek out those candidates that may be part of diverse groups, and partnering with those groups in the marketplace as well. And then lastly, we've really been on a journey to influence the organization to shop in different pools than we have before. And we've had some success in hospitality, CPG, luxury, and the retail sectors.
Thank you. So first of all, we're going to loop back to technology tools a little bit more and probably give you a chance to speak even more about that program and or other tools that you're using. But before I move on to the next question I had for you, Jennie, which is about going outside the current industry pool, did you want to add something else specifically about diversity or inclusion from your standpoint at EJ Gallo?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of the similar things in the sense of, trying to remove bias from interviewing, but we're also reaching out to our employee resource groups and how do we engage with them to continue to help us, drive diversity, create programs that are meaningful within our company.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Constance, your diverse people is actually the best way to get your candidates, actually. If you have diverse people in your organization, they know diverse people as well. So that's a good point, Jennie.
Yeah, it is. It's different, a little bit different also in California, probably than up here in Walla Walla. And maybe some of the audience also are in different communities where there's less of access to a diverse hiring pool. But that's a different aspect of that question. I wanted to come back to you, Jennie, about the need for seeking out potential candidates outside of our current industry pool. Has that changed, and what's the impact of that, and how are you dealing with that?
Absolutely. We've definitely had to reach outside of a specific industry. Now, really, this was focused when the labor market was a lot tighter. So we were, having to look at, retail and other seasonal industries. We've really started to make a shift, though, and really doing skill-based and competency-based recruitment. And so instead of focusing on specific industries that we think are going to be, easily transferable, right? It's easy to go from one winery to another, but how do we bring people in from all different industries and really focusing on the skills and competencies that are going to allow them to be successful in the roles that we have open? And that's kind of will be a theme through all of the topics that I think we may have is, being able to take people and be able to flex, right? We've really had to flex our talent pool this year and potentially ask people to be in different roles than what they were initially hired into. And so for us, that's been sort of a lever and something that we've really been focusing on.
Good. And keeping on that same vein, there's a question from an attendee, Mark, about sharing some specific examples of how your recruiters go into the market and what type of actions they take there. So I think that is about going into the current industry pool and beyond.
Sure, absolutely. So some of the things that we do is, LinkedIn is a huge tool for everybody that's in this space. And so within LinkedIn, there's all of these different groups that are diverse that you can actually pull from and advertise your job. So we're making sure that they actually get into those groups, join them, circulate their job postings, make sure that they're connecting with some of our organizations in the marketplace, like the Black MBA Association, the NAACP, any of those groups that we might have a large volume of diverse candidates around. And we've specifically have been working this year to put into place a posting strategy that hits a lot of the physical diversity aspects, like the Latin community, Latinx community, the Black X community, LGBTIQX community, the whole gambit.
Mm-hmm. And Amy asked about the post and pray versus more of a proactive and marketing approach to seeking out candidates. Can you discuss what that means specifically?
Yeah, so when I think back when I first joined this organization, and I noticed a lot that people were doing a traditional posting on the website, going to Wine Jobs and a few other places. What we've tried to do is get them more marketing focused and be more to attract those passive candidates that are actually at other organizations around. So we've been using our tools like LinkedIn to go in and actually map the market to look at, who do we want to attract? What does that profile look, all the way down to the cultural pillars that we are trying to attract as well, and looking at similar organizations to recruit from. So really getting them in the market to have conversations. And that also leads to bringing back that industry information as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back. There's other questions about technology coming in, but I would like to switch gears a little bit and put this towards you, Jennie. In terms of the corporate workplace, I presume that we're seeing an increase in the share of new hires that are structured to work remotely right from the outside, from the start of their new employment. What challenges does this present in terms of validating their capabilities and their fit? And what are the drawbacks for the new hire in terms of integrating into the culture of EJ Gallo, or in your imagination of a new workplace? Do you anticipate impacts in terms of retention and satisfaction?
Yeah, so we have shifted.
That's like 4 questions at once. But sorry.
Prompt me if I don't hear them all. But yeah,
all right, I'll check them out.
We're just like everyone else, right? So far, a lot of our jobs have shifted to be 100% remote. Obviously, trying to keep people out of the office that don't need to come in and expose those that we really need to have in the office has been critical for us. So I've actually been 100% remote since middle of March. I am as well a hiring manager, right? I onboarded my first employee 100% remote, which creates some challenges. But let me step back to kind of the interview process. We use targeted selection, which is a behavioral-based interviewing technique. We've always used that. It was really easy to shift that to a virtual. Our interviews have gone 100% virtual as well. And so I think assessing talent has not necessarily changed, but how we have managers interview and the circumstances in which people are interviewing is where we put some training around. They may have kids in the room, they may have someone run through, they may have a dog walk through, whatever it may be. So let's look at the candidate, make sure that we're assessing, the skills and experiences that they're providing through the targeted selection interviewing. So we've actually had really positive feedback from our hiring managers as well as the candidates with going virtual for interviews. We've been able to speed up our process to interview, our process for hiring. So we've had some real positives. Now, where I think the challenges are going to come in are going to be more of the, we've switched our online orientation to virtual. How do we get new employees their packets, their laptops, all of those things? Those are things that we didn't have to necessarily deal with in the past. And so working through those. And then how do you create that engagement in our culture when they've actually never been on campus? So that becomes the struggle, right? So those of us who had been with our companies before and shifting to online is one thing, right? We already knew our culture, we knew our peers, we met them in person. Now it's how do we do that in a virtual world? And I think that's going to be the challenge that we may not see the impacts for quite some time, right? We're all in this together right now. We can't come in, but what happens when we can and we want to continue to keep people remote? So those are the things we're working through, providing training to managers and employees as to how to work remote, what flexibilities can we provide, how do you lead a team that's 100% virtual? I don't think it's necessarily a lack of seeing people, because honestly, I'm on video more now and see more of my customers online than I ever did before, right? When they're in the plant, sometimes I would just call. So I don't know if it's necessarily that, but it is going to be that engagement, the interactions that happen at water coolers that get work done and create some, creative solutions to problems. Those are the things that we're working to, and we do a lot of virtual events. So right now, communication is key for us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, when you take the initiative to put up a video screen to talk about something, there's always going to be an agenda for that. Whereas a lot of ideas happen in the margin and in passing, and also just a lot of, friendship that can just happen. So we at Lake Cole are taking a once a month outing as a team. Since we see each other mostly remote, we're making a chance to go to a tasting room together and sit safely apart from each other, but have some time to see each other outside of an agenda that we open on the screens.
Yeah, we're excited, as recruiters, for the option for more positions to go remote. We're even hiring, not considering that long-term they would be on site. And, going back to the diversity conversation, it's really opened up our ability to grab, and attract a more diverse applicant pool. Because for us, right, our positions are based in Modesto, California.
Yes.
And it's, our community isn't as diverse as other places. And so we've really started to leverage that as an organization and really evaluate before we open a position, whether or not, okay, will this need to be on site? How often will this person need to come on site if needed long-term, or can it be 100% virtual?
Yeah, so the moving of the share towards virtual or towards technology-based allows more diversity. That's a very interesting point of view that I hadn't thought of. I wanted to come back to the role of technology, Mark, and kind of gear this towards you. How has the role of technology tools for hiring changed in light of COVID and the changing landscape for potential candidates? And there was a question from a participant who specifically was asking about the AI tools, and this was Aaron, the AI tools, not Aaron Kirschenman, but a different Aaron. The AI tools available for the potential candidates. Let's see, let me get the question directly correct from Aaron. She would be interested in knowing, or he interested in knowing, how Mark balances the AI tools available with the potential candidate drop off during the process. So it's about the role of technology tools and the issue in dealing with less available candidates, let's say.
Sure, absolutely. Look, listen, technology is huge for us today, of course, being in this new world. And the good news for us is that we were on that technology journey before COVID even started. So we had a little bit of a lift in the space. And to Jennie's point, I'm making way more connections with people today than I did before then. So, we've been exploring, everything from the video-based interviews to how do we increase and get the speed that we need, but move those candidates through quickly. And so some of the AI tools that we introduced here, as I mentioned before, is a tool that we're using today called Harvard. And there are a lot of these assessment tools in the market to be evaluated that you can use, some small and some large. But the tool that we're using really does a good job of doing a psychological evaluation a little bit. And it does a cultural assessment as well as a competency-based assessment, depending on the work that person's going to do, and actually gives you a way to actually rank those results from lowest to highest. Now, the key is to not use that to make your hiring decision, but to add to the points of getting to those candidates that might be actually right for the company. So we've just started implementing that a couple of months ago. And it's been huge for actually the candidate experience as well as the recruiter experience and the hiring manager experience, because what the candidates have come back and said is that it's refreshing that an organization is taking time to get to know about them, and also gives them a light into, is this the right role for them and the right area for them, and actually gives them a little bit of a way to, kind of look and see, are they actually going down the right route or not. So that's some of the tools that we've looked at, and we've, with the addition of all the Zoom and video interviews that we have, and just trying to figure out how much that we can automate through the process to just make it quicker, seamless, and the speed to getting people through and getting it done the right way. I actually like the video interview because for me, I think managers, what I'm seeing, Jennie, and I don't know if this is the same for you, but I'm noticing that people are paying particularly more close attention to cues from candidates that they haven't normally done when you have that personal interaction. It's weird. For me, it seems like that I'm getting people understanding, looking at their presence and how they present in certain ways, particularly in the marketing sector. It's actually really good.
Mm-hmm. How do you spell this tool, Harbor? Can you?
Harver, Harver.
Thank you. Okay. And keeping on with the technology string, I want to bring it back to you, Jennie. And there was a question from a participant, from an audience member, asking about could we provide recommendations for online platforms that we would utilize for various HR functions, such as onboarding or performance management even?
Absolutely. I mean, we've looked at AI. I think we're probably implementing things a little bit different. From the candidate perspective, we use something called HireView for video interviews.
Is it Hire, H-I-R-E? View, not Hire as,
Yeah.
okay.
I can send it out as well. And we're using that as a way, and really I think how we're representing it to candidates is, we can look at your piece of paper for your resume, but that doesn't tell us who you are. And so we're using it as that kind of first round for us, like, this is your living resume. Tell us about you, right? There's scripted questions that they can record, but giving them another sort of bring three-dimensional aspect to a candidate versus, a recruiter just looking at resumes. And then we're also using technology to have managers or employees that work for us record videos and tell a candidate about the job ahead of time so they can learn more. Again, I think, reading a piece of paper tells you one thing about a job, but from hearing it from someone who's worked in the job for 5 or 10 years, or who maybe was new, or a manager describe what they're looking for, just ways to make those kinds of things more personal.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really good. And what this trend is, and what people are trying to do, is to bring you into the experience of working in wine, right? And we make wine, so it's, you want to enjoy and understand what that environment is. And we're doing the same thing. We have those videos that when you come in, it's in the day in the life. I know you're interested in the supply row. Here's a day in the life of what that could look like for you. So it's really changing the game of how people, from changing that, give me your application and fill out this form, to experiencing the day in the life of.
Yeah, I think a day in the life sort of concept would be really important for people coming from outside the industry, especially.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of that, another attendee asked, and this I would direct back to you, Jennie, because we talked about the ability to interview virtually, and searching for candidates who will remain remote opens up a lot of space geographically in terms of acquiring potential new employees. So this person acknowledged the good news is this has opened the floodgates to many out-of-state candidates from other CPG companies. However, they have found that this desirable pool is more likely to withdraw at the late stages for several reasons. Have you experienced this sort of window shopping phenomena? And are you doing anything to mitigate that?
Not yet. We haven't. I mean, we've always had a sales force that's been located across the US. And what we're finding is not only are we recruiting talent from other locations, but our current employee base, that when a spouse needs to relocate because their spouse got another job, or they want to be closer to family, we've actually been able to allow them to relocate and remain employed with us. So it's helping us with things like retention, as well. So for us, we haven't seen that as of yet. Again, other positions, it's still pretty early to know whether or not we're going to see an impact, but we're not having the withdrawal rate.
Okay, and that dovetails to my next question, which I think is important about the role of reputation in terms of companies. So I know Gallo, it's a golden ship, it's a golden train when it stops for you, as is Treasury. So, Mark, what do you feel is the role of reputation in terms of hiring at this time, and has that evolved from previous or quote normal times?
Yeah, and it was huge when COVID first hit. I think when COVID first hit, people were less likely to, I think they put the brakes on like, whoa, I don't want to make a move during this time, because it was the unknown, right? And now that COVID's more mature, I'm actually seeing more candidates come through and wanting to explore as companies that are out there are starting to have problems and, and are not as liquid as they would have been at the beginning of COVID. So I'm starting to notice that pool, and specifically into some tight recruiting areas in our supply chain business that we had troubles before, has actually opened up a bit. So reputation is always key, and particularly cultural reputation. What does it look and feel like to work at an organization? That's going to always be first and foremost for people, and something that we're really cautiously working on, and that we have, launched what we call our new DNA here at Treasury, which is really around the culture pillars of what it's like to be here and getting us to be on that journey an employer of choice.
Okay. Jennie, would you like to add anything about that in terms of the reputation question?
We've been kind of on that journey as well the last several years, really focusing on our employment branding and reputation. And what are the things that we need to do to continue to be the employer of choice, whether you're here or you're looking to join Gallo. So, candidate experience has been something we focused on the last couple of years. Again, internal candidate experience as well as internal. How are we living our values, not only internally, but how do we make sure that our values are represented when we're interviewing candidates, even if they're the ones that aren't selected. And what we find is that really helps us in the long run, right? Because even if they didn't get that job, they could be a fit for a future job. So again, reputation is something that is a huge priority for us. Luckily, as I think a privately held company, we have a really engaged workforce, and it certainly helps us and helps keep that engagement high.
Okay, thank you. I hope that the attendees and audience are feeling like their questions are being heard, so we continue to welcome them, and I think we're doing a pretty good job integrating them as we go along, because they're right on spot for the areas we're looking to cover. I would like to start this question out with you, Jennie. Do you feel that there are subsectors of the industry that will, due to the new normal, be evolving significantly or be phased out? And how do you feel about placing candidates in these types of positions?
I absolutely think that we're evolving. I think we were evolving before COVID in many places, but it sort of propelled us even far faster than kind of we expected industries to change. And so we're just having to adapt, right? So things like obviously hospitality and how we bring candidates into our tasting room is changing. Our production employees and how many do we have, working right next to each other. So technology and operations is going to continue to be something that we're looking at and probably accelerating, right? As we're lucky we work in an industry that's really has been insulated to a lot of the ups and downs in the market over the years. Where unfortunately, when people are happy, they drink. When there's troubles, they are often drinking as well. So we have that insulation. And so how do we make sure that we're adjusting our supply chain, right? We've got a lot more online presence, which also impacts our marketing teams, right? We don't need a traditional brand marketer. The focus on our brand online, and how do we make those connections with candidates, with our industry and those that are drinking our products as well, right? The virtual stuff that's happening. So I think there's so much shifting. I think new products is seeing a big shift, right? We're all having to be a lot more agile and how quick we can bring products to market. And I think this really goes back to when you talk about how is this impacting, kind of how we're hiring and candidates. is that if you're hiring candidates for competencies and skills that they have, those are often transferable amongst many functions in the organization. And so it allows you to pivot a lot more quickly than if you're hiring a lot of specialists, right? Specialists are slower to transition than when you hire for a broader group of skills that are transferable.
Understood. Mark, on the same question, I mean, I think that COVID has probably brought more automation, and I'm thinking about supply chain, specifically supply chain automation. Is that something that you are dealing with in terms of the need for candidates for that sector changing in terms of their technology capabilities and or just needing less people? You want to speak about a little bit about the certain sectors that are being phased out or changing significantly?
Yeah, I think the two big things is, supply chain optimization and also the ability to manage change. I think that's a big key call out for skill sets that's needed. And then on top of that is the shopper experience online. I think those three things are really hot skill sets these days that people seem to want to have. So those are the three things that, I've seen as, to dovetail off of what Jennie was talking about earlier. Those are the three skill sets that I think are huge. But further to that too, and talking about how do you get to what is needed to drive the business forward, is that one of the things that we've been trying to do here and that we've launched this year is a different way of managing strategic workforce planning. And we're taking a JIT approach, a just-in-time approach, starting with role segmentation. And that is changing the process of strategic workforce planning from being a finance-led function to being a strategy-led conversation around what is needed to drive those businesses forwards. And that can help us get to what are those critical skill sets that we need and roles that we need to keep a lookout for long-term to drive the business forward. That's something that's been a huge shift for us, here internally that we're in the middle of now.
Well, thank you. Mark, while more meetings and obviously hiring interviews are happening virtually, what do you think are the drawbacks? We're talking about a lot of the benefits of that, but what do you feel are the drawbacks for both the candidates and for the employers?
It's been interesting for me. I haven't seen a lot of drawbacks. The only drawback that I really get from that is the personal connection. That's always, pretty huge. You want to, see a person in person, how they interact, and that their body language, that sort of thing. It's just been about adjustment and getting used to the platform and getting the skills for people that don't have them in this environment the right way. So we've been we're on a journey with some training this year to make sure that our hiring managers have the capability to live in this new world and to evolve the way it needs to go. Because even if we do go back, this is a piece that I think will live in some way, shape, or form on all enterprises, because as Jennie was talking about earlier, it does help with the speed of the process and getting things through. And I feel that, for me, it's been a positive, this environment that we're in now in video world and, being able to be in an electronic age.
Great. Jennie, I would like to ask you about the role for industry recruiters. Do you use those? You're an internal head of talent acquisition, but how have you seen the role for industry recruiters? Has it increased or decreased in this time? How have you managed to move away from using costly recruiters if you have? Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been on a journey over the last 5 years to reduce the dependency on third-party recruiters. And how we've done that is to continue to build the talent acquisition team. I think, a lot of us in HR, we're seeing move towards kind of those COE models, so a center of excellence, and Gallo is no different. And talent acquisition is seen as a COE. And so we've actually elevated some of the roles on our recruiting team to be talent acquisition partners. So moving some of the recruiting work from our HR business partners into TA and really getting connected with the business and developing some deep industry knowledge in those areas that they support. So, we don't spend a ton with third party. There are a handful of positions where it absolutely makes sense to use a third party. A lot of more IT type recruitment where we will, but everything else is done in-house with our recruiting team. There's no one better that understands our corporate culture and what we're looking for. And we've really started to make a shift towards, that overall company involvement and creating a corporate culture of recruitment, right? It's not TA's job necessarily to bring everybody in, but we all know people, we have contacts, people that we've worked with before, and how do we create that recruitment culture? We say recruiting is a team sport, right? When we work with our hiring managers. And so that's really helped us move away from that dependency on third party.
Got it. Before we move on to the next question we had an audience question that kind of, I think, covers some of the area we have talked about, but I want to just throw it to you, Mark, and maybe you have something you may add that we hadn't missed, or maybe just restate the key points. Natalie is someone who is focused on hiring in Napa and Sonoma counties, and she's experienced a steep decline in available candidates given the addition of fires, smoke, power outages, and evacuations, which we talked about, and which Ms. Ford, Judith talked about as well. While we all know and hear that unemployment is at an all-time high, they're still experiencing a really shallow talent pool in North Bay, and would love your experiences and reflections.
Yeah, and not only that, I'm going to back up for a minute, because Treasury, we actually moved our corporate offices to be in Oakland to compete for talent. That's good and bad, because it also created more issues for us. In the Bay Area, you're challenged with, it's heavy tech, right? And then Napa, it's not going to grow. It's housing, it's available talent, it's competing with construction and some of the other, industries that pay more in that. So we experience the same thing here. What we've been trying to do is figure out how do we package and solve the problem of particularly those roles in supply that are, kind of high volume roles that come up year over year. So we're still working through it. It's ever changing, and some of those we use partnerships for, to Jennie's point, and makes sense for us to use partners for, but for the most part, it's just getting creative as much as possible. And then partnering with some of those state organizations that's one of the reasons why we brought direct employers in, because they are the only organization in the US that has relationship with every state organization around, and they give you that personal contact that we can call and try to get more marketing for our roles. But it's a challenge. It's not unique to anyone here, I'm sure.
Great, thank you. We're getting close here to 11:20 when we certainly wanted to open up to Q&A, but I think people have been coming forward with their questions. I would welcome anyone who has a question. I know a lot of what I was, my point of view in coming into this as a small winery with only 15 employees, it's a kind of a world apart from Treasury and Gallo. So there may be small winery concerns or versions of the above questions that we've covered that you guys might want to have them take a stab at. So for sure, bring those questions forward in the next few minutes. But I did want to also come back to you, Mark, about all of this remote and these windows into each other's personal lives that we have with all the screens open. How do you think, well, I know from here, we've had some funny situations happen during our calls here at Lake Cole, and we were doing a morning call every single morning during the hard shutdown, just to also check on each other and make sure everyone was okay. And we've moved that to once a week now. But how do you feel that the new workplace with increasing remote working and the personal challenges people are facing, how has that blurred the lines between work and personal lives? Does this create a de facto benefit of flex time, or does it create issues in terms of personal information being inadvertently shared? Do you see this causing issues, causing benefits? What do you see there?
I think it's both. For me, I can talk about my own personal experience here. For me, Jennie and I had this conversation the other day. For me, I think the flex time is good for people because people feel like that they're more engaged and they can get things done. But for me, it's been an exercise in when do I turn off? Because now it used to be that you go to the office and you have the separation of your work life and your home life. Even if you were flexing just a little bit of the time, you still had that wall. But now I struggle. Sometimes I have to catch myself at 7 o'clock at night going, oh, I'm still online. It's dark out. You know, I need to get offline. So it's about getting yourself disciplined to get into the cycle of creating, you know, the cutoff of what's, of how to work, you know, getting yourself a quiet space, which is always challenging. I find in my household, the dog's running around or somebody's showing up. But it's just around, you know, just kind of getting your groove as you get into this world. But it is challenging in some ways, but also there's a lot of benefits that I know that I've heard from people. I think people have felt really engaged because I can tell you that I'm connecting with teams that I've not worked with before way more than I have in the past. And it's been a real good benefit for me, particularly on the global platform that we have. I mean, we've been working across regions now in this new world that we're in seamlessly.
I think it's allowed us here at Lake Cole to show vulnerability or to share concerns with each other when, you know, someone's husband works at a winery and someone there has a COVID infection, and, you know, we want to be worried with them. We want to be their safety network, emotional support system for that. And we weren't really called on to be emotional support for each other last year, let's say. We all kept our personal issues to ourselves, but kind of opened all that up. There was a question here I'd like Jennie to address. How do you approach sourcing for seasonal hiring? And I guess that would be like high volume, but that seasonal aspect. Could you cover that for us?
Absolutely. We actually centralized recruitment for our seasonal positions 2 years ago with the talent acquisition team. So it's really allowed us to create a holistic approach because we recruit not only for Napa, Sonoma, Central Coast, but our Fresno and Livingston facilities as well. So our employment branding, we engage with them early, and we really utilize them to get the word out and develop a strategy that's going to bring in candidates from across industries. Like I said, we've really focused on that in the last couple of years. And then we also, you know, use technology. This is where we used HireVue interviewing to really work through kind of the volume and how can we move through that in a shorter period of time so that way candidates know from when they apply to when an offer happens, how long that's going to take. Now, we all know we have the moving target of when harvest is actually going to hit, and then how do we keep engaged with them? So, you know, we've leveraged technology and employment branding to get the numbers that we need because they're pretty significant numbers for us.
Yeah, could you add to that, Mark?
Yeah, so we centralized in a way because we have a much smaller talent acquisition team. So we do have one recruiter that manages the process for that, but it's been heavily turned over to the sites themselves to actually manage the process along with the recruiter that's been centralized. So it's a pretty tight process that we run. They're used to it. They know it year over year. Happens the same way. We do the postings. We rely heavily on our branding. There's some universities that we reach out to at that time to do recruitment through, but similar to Jennie's, but it's just not as probably as formalized.
Okay.
And then we do use, you know, agencies where needed for backups, kind of like overflow or pool candidates that we need. So we've developed some pretty deep partnership with agencies as well there.
Yes, we the same here.
Okay. Erin, did you want to jump in and add something right here? I had a note that Erin wanted to answer a question as well, but maybe she's doing it directly in writing to someone. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and the title of this section was called New Age Recruiting. So I definitely did not want to miss anything that Jennie or Mark wanted to offer in terms of either big picture or a specific that we might not have covered, but perhaps your advice to hiring managers or talent acquisition managers or general managers like me who have to cover all the bases. Anything that you would like to add in terms of advice or tools, tricks, anything like that, Jennie?
Yeah, I think, the agility is going to be the biggest thing, really focus on like we are skills. Somebody may have a background that's not something you've ever considered before, but that also brings a unique perspective. And brand is key, right? Those that are comfortable with your company, that know that what you do, how do you leverage your employees to help bring talent in is going to be really important, I think, as we continue to move forward. I think, the war for talent may not be the same place it was a year ago, but it's no less complicated than it was a year ago. And I think, those are the important things to think about.
Yeah. Mark, I'd like to ask you the same question, but I wanted to give you some feedback. One of the participants said she did love the idea of the day in the life videos to kind of source out potential candidates. Any other advice to add on top of what Jennie has shared? Thank you about that agility and the importance of the brand. Both of those are really useful pieces of information.
And I think similar to what Jennie said, the competency base, shifting the managers, kind of higher expectations to really looking at the competencies they're looking for in roles versus what is that, a traditional job description is kind of key for this new world order. And then, for me, it's about, how can you create these individual experiences? You have to be flexible. You have to, what works in supply doesn't work in finance. What works in finance doesn't work in operations. You've got to create those individual experiences that help you get to solve those particular problems within your business.
I think that's excellent because sometimes specialists, while they can be very strong, are kind of pigeonholed, and this need to be able to flex people around, it's extremely valuable. It's a really different paradigm. I wanted to conclude with a few minutes left. I think I really appreciate you guys. You're amazing professionals, and this was a wonderful opportunity. So thank you to Wine Business Monthly and Wine Jobs for choosing me to help moderate.